আসন্ন একাদশ সংসদ নির্বাচনে বাংলাদেশের ভোটারদের ভোট দেওয়ার উদ্দেশ্য নিয়ে জরিপ পরিচালনা করেছে গবেষণা ও উন্নয়ন কেন্দ্র। রাজধানীর হোটেল ওয়েস্টিনে জরিপটির ফল প্রকাশ করা হচ্ছে। আমরা সরাসরি সেখানে চলে যাচ্ছি।
Pre-election polls in South Asia are notoriously difficult to conduct. The reason for that is that there's a widespread belief that people will not tell you the truth about what they think. Now, there are many reasons they may not tell you the truth. They may not tell you the truth because they're just difficult and they don't want to tell the enumerator. Another thing widely believed here is that people are frightened. They are not sure who they're talking to, and they do not wish to tell their real views for fear that these may get them into trouble. So the question we asked was, if the election was held today, who would you vote for? Now, this survey attempts to answer this question. All people who are trying to forecast election results, which I must say that I'm not particularly trying to do here, are also have to deal with the question of, are you going to vote? Now, in the United States, typically 60 to 70% of the people who are on the voter list will vote. In Bangladesh, it runs typically more 70 to 75%. In the 2008 election, it was much higher. We ask everybody that we interview, do they intend to vote? And everybody says they intend to vote. So the survey cannot screen out non-voters. And we do not have the data available, say, in the United States. In the United States, you try to screen out who are the non-voters by looking at whether they voted in the past. But those records are not available from the Election Commission. I cannot get a copy of the voter list which is marked he voted or did not vote in previous elections. So we have essentially assumed that the non-voters will be distributed over the responses of the survey proportionally to what the answers were. Now, we just didn't know how to do any better on that question. Now, it's popular opinion in Bangladesh in many quarters, and I suspect that many people in this room, is that people are going to misrepresent their views. We tried to do three things to make the poll as accurate as possible. The first is we worked very hard on the sample. This is a sample designed from the beginning to give every voter an equal chance of being put into the opinion poll. When we start with nobody on the list, and then out of all the potential voters, the 100 million plus, the procedures basically let everybody have an equal chance of being selected. And in order to do that, we have used the voter lists as part of the process of selection. Use of the voter list improves the quality of the survey at the end when you go into the village and have to know and want to know who to talk to, who is on the list. If you have a name from the voter list, then you have a specific target. Many surveys do not are rather vague at that last stage of who are you going to choose in the village to talk to. The second thing that we did was, instead of asking people what they intended to do, we gave them a ballot. Do we have the ballot? This is what the ballot was attached to the handout. The ballot, there were blue ballots and red ballots. The red ballots were given to the women, and the blue ballots were given to the men. And our enumerator would mark the age of the person he's talking to, and also their religion. And then hand them the ballot and a pen and ask them to please check what they wanted to do. So they were offered 6 alternatives. One alternative was the BNP JOF. The second was the Awami League Marjot. The third was the Jatiya Party. When the survey was designed, what the Jatiya Party was going to do was unclear. I guess it's still unclear. So the Jatiya Party was, has its own place here. And then if you didn't want to say, or if there was a place for that, if you said you were not going to vote, you could tick that. Or if you reported that you hadn't made up your mind, you were uncertain, then you could tick that. And the person being questioned was basically asked to tick this ballot in secrecy. I mean, to turn his or her back from whoever is around and mark it, fold it up, and our enumerator would carry a plastic transparent ballot box in which there were always a lot of ballots already there, and shake the ballot box up, ask the person to drop the ballot into it, shake it up again. So we have effectively disconnected any ballot from who answered it. Of course, if the police pounce on you in that village, they can probably match it up. But once you're back in our headquarters, impossible to match this ballot with anybody. So in this way, we hope to create a sense of confidence in the respondent that there was reasonable secrecy and reasonable privacy in the response that was given. The third thing that we did, which we do in all our surveys, is a big effort at supervision of what the enumerators are doing. We've been doing a lot of surveying with respect to this election besides this, and we've had almost 200 people in the field. They're shifted around from one survey to another. So we're quite confident that the people collecting the data are unbiased because they're only doing small parts of it and moving back and forth from one kind of work to another. In addition to that, it's our methods to ask the person that we interview for their telephone number, which almost all Bangladeshis are prepared to give our enumerator. And then when they're back in our office, our data clerks will call, not all of them, but a significant number of the households to be sure that the enumerator actually was there, always a problem whether they actually did the work, and to check on one or two of the test questions that are in the survey to be sure that indeed this was a properly conducted interview. So we have some confidence that our enumerators have actually collected the data from the people that they were supposed to collect it from, and that if we're uncertain about the results, then we will ask them. But we will never ask them about the voting because we don't know. Actually, we don't know who they voted for. We know this person is on our list of a respondent, and there are other questions that were asked which we can connect that person to, but we do not know who he voted for, who he or she voted for. So with these three efforts, we have tried to do the best we can to produce an accurate picture of what Bangladeshis think about what their voting preferences are. Now, I want to be very clear that when the election is over, there will be a number called the total popular vote for each group, not the numbers of seats. And essentially that's what we are forecasting. I shouldn't say forecasting, but that's what the survey tries to get at. this sample size here was 2,249 people, sort of odd sample size, but we're basically aiming at somewhere of the order of 2,300. And in this particular case, we had one enumerator who we found was misrepresenting the data. He had gone to his hotel and checked all the questions off there. So we had to throw all his work out. So what we are saying here is that, as statisticians say, there's a 95% probability that any percentage that you look at in the tables is that the true value, as opposed to the sample value, the true value is the sample value minus 3.1% or plus 3.1%. So what we are saying is that there's a 95% chance of the true value being within that range. Okay, the results now are presented in two tables. This is a big, hard-to-read table. This says that 60% of the voters supported the Mahajot, and 22% the BNP or the JOF. 10% were undecided, 3% refused to answer, the Jatiya Party 4%, and less than 1% said they did not intend to vote. Okay, that's the first conclusion. Can we go back to the first table a minute? Yeah, yes, thank you. There are a few things that you can conclude. First, I compare this with the 2008 election. In the 2008 election, the popular vote, the Mahajot received 57%. The BNP Grand Alliance 37%, and others 6%. The second thing is we can tell a little bit more detail because we have broken down the results between men and women by age group and also by where people live. The table says big cities, small towns, and rural. Let me define what that means in our work. You can argue with our definition, but this is a definition that we use. Big cities are division headquarters. Small towns are district headquarters, unless it's a division. And rural is everything else. So, as I said earlier, every voter in Bangladesh has an equal chance of being included in the survey. Whether that's a 62-year-old woman living in a farm in Sylhet, or a young man in Dhaka teaching at a university, or a military officer stationed in Sabar. Everybody in principle has the same probability of being selected. If you're on the voter list, you have to be on the voter list to get selected. So we have talked to a sample of everybody, old people, young people, rural people, city people, men and women. And in the way that you treat survey data, this is ultimately adjusted so that it conforms with the actual population distribution in the country. For example, if we think of women who are over 50 who are resident in rural areas, perhaps, let me guess, 18% of the population of Bangladesh is in that category. Now, in the conduct of the survey, we may end up with 14% of the people that we spoke to are defined that way. So we adjust the number so the weight, the voting preference of rural women over 50, we adjust that so that the weight that they carry is the weight that they carry in the population, which will be slightly different from what comes up in the sample. This is standard procedure for all sampling. One of the first things you should always ask in Bangladesh is how they did the weighting. What we found was that there was no difference between the voting intentions of men and women, and more of a surprise to me, there was no difference in the voting intentions of young people, 18 to 29, than the people over 29. 18 to 29 is mostly people who have not voted before, who have gotten on the voter list. Well, they might have voted in 2014, but that doesn't count. The last serious election was 2008. So all these people have come on the voter list since then. But their voting intentions are basically the same as everybody else. We can also see from this table that relatively to the people that are supporting them, the Mahajot is weaker in small towns than it is in large cities and rural areas. And support for the JOF is relatively stronger in rural areas and small towns than in the big cities. And finally, something that perhaps is obvious, that Hindu voters overwhelmingly support the Mahajot. Okay, now I emphasize that Table 1, or this table, was based upon the ballots. The secrecy of the survey, the best that we could establish, is reflected in the results here. Can we have the second table? The second table, however, is people's opinion is not protected by secrecy. No. Yeah. Next one. That's it. In this, we asked the respondent, we asked them to evaluate the political party at 3 levels: good, okay, and bad, I don't know. So we first asked for the BNP, and after they answered that, then we asked for the Awami League, and then we asked for the Jatiya Party. So in principle, you could say good for all of them or bad for all of them. There's no comparison here. I want to emphasize that. Nobody was ever asked which is better. They were only asked to evaluate the party from what they thought of the party in those 3 levels: good, so-so, and bad. So you can see the results. They're quite clear that the more people thought the Awami League were good than thought the BNP were good, and more people thought the BNP were good than the Jatiya Party. On the other hand, the Jatiya Party in particular had a lot of people who didn't know. When they don't know it, I don't know whether they didn't want to express an opinion, or more likely they just didn't have a view on this. Now, what we've talked about so far is what the survey tried to do and what the results were of the survey. The RDC also has a computer model which takes the results of the survey and tries to determine the outcome in each constituency. This model has worked quite successfully in 2001 and in 2008. I mean, in a predictive sense. The model says this is what's going to happen well before the election, and then you compare it with what happened. So we use this model with these results, and we came out with the Mahajot at 248 seats, the JOF at 49, and others, independents at 3. Now this model basically incorporates the data for each constituency for the past 4 elections, 91, 96, second election in 96, 2001, and 2008. And it basically, there's a picture here of the way the voting goes in each of the 300 constituencies based on all of that information. And what drives the result is what is the overall voting for the political parties. If you say to me, okay, I know that the voting is going to be 50% for Mahajot and 50% for JOF, what is the outcome of the seats? If you tell me that, I can put that into the model and give you an answer. But the only thing that I put in the model that I'm showing here is what was the outcome of the survey. So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes what I wanted to say about our survey. I'm very happy to answer all questions to the best of my ability.
I'm Shakant Hussain. I'm working for Delhi Chartered Council. And I have 2 questions from you. One is your sample size is 2,249.
Yes.
And our voters are around 1 million, 1 billion. So
100 million. 100 million.
100
10
million,
crore, right.
Yeah. 1 billion, I said. Okay, and do you think the sample size is enough to have a good prediction before the election result? One question. And another thing is, you have taken an opinion from 2 parties, BNP and Awami League and the Jatiyo Party. And if I go through the row of the BNP, you said 27.6% politicians said yes, this is good, and 40.7% accepted, and 18.2% said it is bad. Okay, I'm not going to go through all the columns, and I just want to know from which level politicians of BNP did you take a comment about your survey?
No, this is not. This reflects the people. This is the 2000.
No, but you said opinion of the political parties.
I mean opinion about the political parties.
Okay,
I used the wrong. I'm sorry. I used the wrong preposition. Okay, the first question. Well, the answer to that is that it is one of the great achievements of modern mathematics to answer your question. Yes, a small sample, if properly managed, will answer these questions. Most of the opinion polls in the United States, for example, are running off 1,000 people. 1,000 people gives you a good answer for a yes, no, or who you're going to vote for type opinion. And you get answers there which are accurate plus or minus 3%. This is how do we know this? I mean, as I say, the development of mathematical statistics in the last 150 years has clarified this result. It has taught us how to design the samples. Now, it's very important that the sampling be random. That is, that out of the people that you're trying to get the answers to, you have to select them randomly. They cannot. I mean, the most famous textbook case was for the 1936 election in the United States, where a magazine included in their issue before the election a card and asked the person to fill in the card as to who they were going to vote for. And overwhelmingly, the answer to that survey was that President Roosevelt was going to be defeated in the election. of course, he won. What was the problem? The problem was that the people that read this magazine were mostly Republicans, so you were not actually sampling the true voter population. I mean, if I go around and ask everybody, who I think may be a BNP person for whatever information I have, ask their opinion, then I'm going to get a completely different answer. The essence of making 1,000 or 2,000 answers to add up to a accurate prediction of the true answer is that you have to select people randomly. And as I said in my statement, the one thing that we have done to really make an effort to do that is to use the voter list. So our enumerators have no discretion as to who to interview. They have to interview the person whose name and address they have from the voter list. And so they cannot sit down and talk to the people who happen to be around the place where they're drinking tea, or if they know people in the village, their friends and relatives. And since we check back in a large number of cases to be sure that they've actually talked to that person, then we think we have done reasonably well at a true randomized sample of the Bangladesh population. So I give a long answer to a short question, but the essential finding of statistics is that you can do what you're talking about, that you can, a small number of answers in a huge population will give you an accurate picture, as long as you have properly managed the sample. More questions?
This is Jumur Bari from Ekatu Television. Yes, in your speech, I can come to know that you did hard work to do the survey, actually, for the sample collection. But it's a secret for you about the random collection. But can you tell us about the districts? Which district you have done this, collecting the sample? I have several questions.
Now, I don't know the answer to that out of my head.
Because our people are more involved and interested about the election than your people, and they change their. If we change the district, the comment of the people will change radically. I mean, so it's not like that. You did all the survey in Dhaka. The result for the Dhaka is very different from the result from Bogura or Dinajpur or Chittagong or Gopalganj.
Okay, let me answer that in two ways. What is our sampling technique? Our sampling technique is to take the upazilas, and we have some requirements to have a certain number in each division. And then for each upazila, we know its population from 2011 census. And so the probability of a upazila in Sylhet division being selected is that number of population in Sylhet in that upazila compared to the total population of Sylhet division. That assigns a probability to every upazila in Sylhet. And then we use random number table, which produces random numbers, to decide which ones we're choosing. Does it matter if you switch it around? Well, the basic, of course, principle of statistics is that it really doesn't matter. We are almost in every district. We have some part of our sample. I'm not sure it's every district, but it's most, like 50. But I cannot tell you out of my head. So let me say something else. In addition to this, we did work that I'm not talking about here. We surveyed 51 constituencies. In each constituency, we talked to a little more than 1,000 people. Now, that spread out all over the country. This is very intensive in the sense that it's 1,000 people inside a constituency. That's 51,000 people. Now, that 51,000 people, when I added up, produced a result for how many people were going to vote for the Mahajot of 60%. Exactly the same as the small sample did. Why would you not do a big sample? The answer is the big sample is expensive. You can see the power. I mean, polling works because it's cheap, relatively cheap. To conduct a census of Bangladesh adults to talk to the 100 million people that are on the voter list would be incredibly expensive. But the cost of talking to 2,200 is actually quite small. But interestingly, the result of that turned out to be the same as the completely separate work on 51,000. Statistics works.
Of course, statistics works, but of course, statistics works, and if I come to believe your survey, then I have several questions. And I mean, you know, the political situation in Bangladesh is changing every day. We are after 3 days, election is knocking our door. After 3 days, it will come. And if the scenario change, I mean, if all parties, other parties will not participate in the election, do you have any prediction about that? I mean, in that case, 100% of people will like Awami League, or?
Well, the answer to that, of course, is that we had an election like that in 2014. So, but what was the result?
In your survey, there is no example for 2014, and you have not.
We've not used that, but what happened in 2014 was that the turnout was very low. Even where there was an election, the turnout was 30%, 30 to 50%, instead of the 70 to 75% that's more typical of Bangladesh elections. So we have nothing to say about anything except the two big alliances voting against each other. We don't know how to handle the Jatiya Party because I don't know what the Jatiya Party is doing. I don't know that anybody knows what they're doing. Even the Jatiya Party doesn't know what it's doing. But so there's some of them in and some of them out. Too complicated. But the effect is small, in my opinion. So. Look, I have this argument several times a day with all of my friends telling me I'm wrong, that RDC is wrong about this. Now, my answer is always the same. My answer has two parts. One is, we've talked to more people than you have. And secondly, you're telling me that many people are lying to me. But how do you know that people are not lying to you? My sense of social interactions in Bangladesh is that people do not want to say things that displease the other person. So they want to try to please you and will tell you what you want to hear. So if you think that's what people are doing for our survey, they're also doing it when they talk to your reporters. Why not? The second point I want to make, a little more complicated. I try to be quick. The view that what you're talking about is that people are thinking about the election and who to vote for. But voting studies all over the world tell us that that is not so. That people stick to the same party over and over again. They're not changing their opinions. We've tried to study that here by asking people in other surveys to tell us their voting history. Who did you vote for in this election, this election, this election? And try to find out how many people were shifting. The answer is almost nobody shifts. 1-2% of people will report that they've shifted. Otherwise, people are like me. I'm a Democrat. I will never vote for a Republican, no matter how bad the Democrat is. I may not vote for the Democrat because I don't like the Democrat, but I will never vote for a Republican. This is the way I think Bangladeshis are. This is the way most people are. So the real outcome of an election is really determined by who goes to the polls, who goes to vote, and who doesn't. And that, of course, under the present circumstances, is a good issue, a good question. So I hope I have responded to it. So I think it's more stable than you're implying, that people are not changing their votes. As I said, they may not vote, they may choose not to go. Like I refused to vote for Hillary because I didn't like Hillary's policies, but I would never have voted for Mr. Trump. Never.
আপনারা বাংলায়ও প্রশ্ন করতে পারেন যে আমি এই জন্য খুব আছি মাইক্রোফোন কি এখানে
Thank you. I am Tofai from Masterman Television. This survey was conducted more than 10 to 12 days ago. You know our election environment is becoming violent day by day. Have any chance to affect the result of the survey in the situation if we compare the real time in voting day? Have any chance? What do you think? This situation have any chance to affect the survey result?
What I think is that whatever conflicts and violence there are may affect who goes to vote, but doesn't affect the underlying choices. That's what I tried to say in the previous question. You are an Awami Leaguer or a BNPer. Yeah, that's what you are. And if you look into the side of your own soul, you may not be those two parties. You may have another one. But you have some views, and those views are not things that are changing. And so your choice of who to vote for, and this is not just me talking here. This is basically what voting studies have done all over the world. I'm not familiar with all of that, but I'm familiar with the American studies. And the American studies show, people are loyal to who their party is. So my answer is, whatever is going on out there may influence whether you vote or not, but it won't influence who you're going to vote for. Come on, guys, men and women. Most of you think I'm completely wrong, so why don't you attack me more?
So you want to say people may not go to the election poll, but they will not change their view?
Yeah, that's what I think, yes. Look, if you look at the vast literature that exists in the United States of how to win elections, they all have one thing to say. Elections are won in the last 72 hours before the election, because that's the time when the political party organizes gets its effort to get its people to the polls. So if you go to one of these constituencies, I think you will find that the Awami League knows who their supporters are. They've been through the voter list. They go talk to people. Similarly, the BNP knows who their supporters are. So the problem is not to get someone to change from one party to another. That will not happen. What will happen is, how good are you at getting your people to come and vote? That's what I think is the story of elections everywhere. Yeah.
Your Excellency, I am Tolhi Roman from Bangladesh24.com. I want to know, election survey, actually this survey is a risk, I think it's a risky one. After the election, if your survey result is wrong, then could you feel in your security threat or in your security life?
No? Why should I feel that? I have no partisan view here. We're scientists, not politicians. If political parties in Bangladesh want to behave like the Catholic Church behaved with Mr. Galileo, then what is the cost? You wreck your science and you end up relatively poor countries like Spain and Portugal compared to Germany and the United States. So.
We've got a last question.
I'm Amit Diptu. I'm the staff reporter of Prothom Aalo. My question is, how many people were engaged with the survey? And the second one is, can you just give us a brief about what RDC do and where your office and what you do rest of the year? Just a small brief. Thank you.
Okay, so the field team that worked on this particular survey comprised about 20 enumerators, people who were in the field, 3 or 4 supervisors who were with them, a couple security people that were to deal with problems if problems arose. In this survey, we had no such difficulties. We often do, but we didn't in this one. Then the team inside the office comprises a group that edits the questionnaire when it comes back and checks for a certain percentage of them by telephoning back to the enumerator, to the respondent. And there are probably 4 or 5 people doing that, then another 3 or 4 doing data entry, and then another 1 or 2 who are proofreading the data printouts from the computer to be sure the data entry was all right, and some other people who are counting the ballots, because what comes back here is the 2,240-some ballots that have to be counted. And so altogether on this survey, there were probably a team of about 15 people working in the office. So, the second part of your question was, RDC's office is in Banani. I think that's enough of an address. We're not secretive, but we don't want to open ourselves up to. Sabrina has my telephone number. If anybody wants to talk in detail, I am always open. The second question, we do survey work of all different types. We do a lot of economic surveys. We've done a lot of surveys of workers. We've done a lot of work on the garment sector, on what worker conditions are, what the realities of the lives of garment workers are. And these surveys are usually done for foreign companies or for interested people in Bangladesh. We've just completing a survey for BBS related to the household income and expenditure survey. We're discussing now a survey on the Rohingyas, a particular question. So, we do, it's a market. We do what we can do. And so sometimes we're busy, sometimes we're not busy. But we have a lot of other things to do because I do a lot of economic studies for clients. We're always building economic models of something or another. So the key people in the company were doing the necessary econometrics and so forth to estimate those models, design them, so forth. So all the work is not survey work, but this last few months has been a lot.
Just I want to take a question, Sanadan. survey?
Which organization or which organization provide your service the funding?
Oh, this survey was funded by independent television and an independent newspaper. So they own all the results. Graciously, they're sharing them.
আমরা এখন শেষ করি আমাদের একটু দুপুরের খাবার ব্যবস্থা আছে আমরা একটু খাওয়া দাওয়া করি সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ আর যদি আপনাদের আরো ফার্দার প্রশ্ন থাকে আমাদের সাথে যোগাযোগ করতে হবে আমরা ইম্প্যাক্ট আর জি ওই আপনার আমাদের প্রেস রিলিজেই আছে কিছু লাগলে আমাদের ইমেল করে বা ফোন করে জানতে পারলেই হবে সকলকে অনেক ধন্যবাদ
Thank you all very much.
Would you mind sitting on here so they can take some shots? Pictures.
Forest, you've been standing for 45 minutes. That's very good.
Come sit. Forest E. Cookson. Oh, আছে এখানে দেওয়া ও আমি শান্তি আপনি ওর ভিজিটিং কার্ডটা সবাইকে একটু টেক্সট করবেন